Good evening and welcome to News Central TV. My name is Mazino Appeal. Here are some stories making rounds beyond the continent. We begin the news in the Middle East, where judges at the International Criminal Court have issued arrest warrants for Israel's Prime Minister and former Defence Minister, as well as Hamas military commander. The statement said a pre-trial chamber had rejected Israel's challenge to the court's jurisdiction and issued warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant. A warrant was also issued for Mohammed Deif, although the Israeli military has said he was killed in an airstrike in Gaza in July. According to the judges, there were reasonable grounds the three men bore criminal responsibility for alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity during the war between Israel and Hamas. Both Israel and Hamas have rejected the allegations. The United States has rejected a decision by the International Criminal Court to issue arrest warrants on Thursday for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his former defense chief, according to a White House National Security Council spokesperson. The spokeswoman added that the U.S. is talking with its allies about what to do next. We remain deeply concerned by the prosecutor's rush to seek arrest warrants and the troubling process errors that led to the decision, the spokesperson said. She stated that they were extremely concerned by the prosecutor's rush to seek for arrest warrants and the concerning procedural mistakes that resulted in this decision. And for more on this, I'm joined by our international correspondent, Afia Hagen. Afia, good evening. Now, please, if you can give us a bit of detail about the arrest warrants issued for Benjamin Netanyahu, Gallant and Deif. Unfortunately, we are having some difficulties with our connection with Afia. We'll come back to her in the meantime. Europe now, where President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russian leader Vladimir Putin is using Ukraine as a weapons testing ground after accusing Moscow of having launched an armed intercontinental ballistic missile at his country. The Ukrainian Air Force alleges that Russia has launched an intercontinental ballistic missile against the city of Dnipro in central eastern Ukraine, but it does not provide further details about the attack's outcome. Russia has not immediately responded. Meanwhile, Air Force says Ukrainian air defense shot down 6 Kh-101 cruise missiles during the attack. According to Russian Foreign Minister, Moscow is ready to consider any realistic peace initiative on the conflict in Ukraine, which takes into account Russia's own interests and the situation on the ground.
Всі характеристики, швидкість, висота міжконтинентальної балістичної. Зараз тривають експертизи. Очевидно, що Путін використовує Україну як полігон.
And now let's go back to our international correspondent, Afia Hagen. Afia, if you can hear us, we're hoping that you can give us more detail about the arrest warrants issued to Benjamin, or rather for Benjamin Netanyahu and Gallant.
Yes, I can. So these arrest warrants stem back to the events of October the 7th, when Hamas attacked Israel, when they kidnapped people, and to the events afterwards, which is now the war that is being waged in Gaza, in which 44,000 people have died. It is worth noting that Mohammed Deif is included in the ICC arrest warrant as well, because the ICC say that they don't have sufficient evidence that he has been killed by Israel. So if we look at Netanyahu and Gallant, Gallant was replaced as defense minister earlier this month, but he's still included in this, and the chamber found reasonable grounds to believe that they each bear criminal responsibility for the following crimes as co-perpetrators for committing the acts jointly with others. And those crimes are the war crime of starvation as a method of warfare, and the crimes against humanity of murder, persecution, and other humane acts. They also said that each bear criminal responsibility as civilian superiors of the war crime of intentionally directing an attack against the civilian population. And if we look at the charges leveled against Mohammed Deif, in that arrest warrant, he said that he's found reasonable grounds to believe that he's responsible for crimes against humanity of murder, extermination, torture, rape, and other forms of sexual violence, as well as cruel treatment, taking hostages, outrages against and personal dignity as well. So those are the details of the arrest warrants that have been issued against these three people.
And what about the response to these issued warrants? What kind of responses have we been hearing?
Well, the United States has said this evening that it fundamentally rejects the ICC's move. The UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer said the UK respects the independence of the ICC, which is the primary international institution for investigating and prosecuting the most serious crimes of international concern. But it goes on to say that the UK government still respects Israel's right to defend itself. Now, the Israeli Prime Minister's office has said that Israel utterly rejects the false and absurd charges by the International Court. International Criminal Court, It said the ICC's decision is anti-Semitic and a modern-day Dreyfus trial, and it would end the same way. There's been no response from Gallant, but Hamas have welcomed the warrants for Netanyahu and Gallant. Nothing is said about the warrant for Mohammed Deif because they believe that he has been killed. But they said that the warrants for Netanyahu and Gallant constitutes an important historical precedent and a correction to a long path of historical injustice against our people.
So what in particular does it mean for the three who have been mentioned, Deif, Netanyahu and Gallant? What exactly does this mean for them?
Well, it means that they would have trouble traveling internationally because the ICC, which is represented or set up in 2002, which has 124 members, the US and Israel are not signatories of it, but the UK is, for instance. It would mean that if Netanyahu or Gallant or Deif, if he is still alive, even though we believe he is dead, but if any of those people travel to any of those countries have to uphold that arrest warrant and they would have to be detained. So it means that they can't freely travel internationally. We can't necessarily see Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu setting off to the UK or to other countries that it perhaps sees as allies. So within their own country, it's not necessarily a huge problem, but if they wanted to travel internationally, then the members of the ICC have the obligation to uphold the warrant and to arrest them. Now, a similar arrest warrant was issued for Vladimir Putin in 2023, and that has been upheld by all the members. And Vladimir Putin hasn't traveled to countries that are within the ICC or that are members of the ICC because he would be arrested. They would have to uphold the warrant. And if the members of the ICC are going to stand by the arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin, they have the same obligation to stand by these arrest warrants that have been issued as well. And that could bring them into some difficulty. For instance, the United Kingdom, which continues to support Israel, would they uphold the arrest warrant? Well, they say they wouldn't want to, but they do have the obligation to do that.
Well, Afia, I want to say thank you very much for joining us this evening again. Now, the European Union says President Vladimir Putin's decision to launch an intercontinental ballistic missile against Ukraine would be a clear escalation after Kyiv accused Moscow of doing so. Ukraine said the missile, without a nuclear warhead, targeted the central city of Dnipro. The Kremlin did not confirm if it had deployed the weapon, but said it was doing everything possible to avoid a nuclear conflict. According to EU Foreign Affairs spokesperson Peter Stano, it's obvious that such an attack would mark yet another clear escalation from the side of Putin while we're assessing the full facts.
Thank you, Louis. We are, of course, following reports that Russia has used an intercontinental ballistic missile against targets in Ukraine. While we are assessing the full facts, it's obvious that such attacks would mark yet another clear escalation from the side of Putin.
Away from that, several parts of the UK have seen heavy snowfall on Thursday as forecasters warn of storm Bert's arrival at the weekend. More than 60 schools across the Highlands and 30 in North Wales have closed, while around 100 in Devon and Cornwall have closed, partially closed or opened later in the morning due to the snow. In areas of the UK, yellow weather warnings for snow and ice are in effect until Friday. This weekend, additional warnings for rain and snow are expected to be issued. This comes as the second named storm of the season is set to bring snow, rain and strong winds to parts of the UK on Saturday. Storm Bert, named by Ireland's Met Arian, is forecast to bring further disruption with snow and rain and wind gusts of 65 to 96 kilometers per hour. And now let's head to South America, where leftist candidate Yamandu Orsi has vowed to put Uruguay back on track if elected president in November 24 runoff against ruling party candidate Alvaro Delgado. Representing the Frente Amplio coalition, Orsi has pledged to govern in the way Uruguay needs, emphasizing a progressive agenda. Supporters have echoed his vision, with one highlighting Orsi's commitments to a progressive path alongside vice presidential candidate Carolina Corse. The runoff election has shaped up as a pivotal moment for Uruguay, with voters deciding between Orsi's leftist policies and Delgado's conservative stance. The outcome could signal a shift in Uruguay's political landscape, reflecting broader regional trends in South America. Meanwhile, Orsi's campaign continues to rally supporters with promises of change and progressive governance.
Y el Uruguay, que a la vez que crecía, le tendía una mano a nuestra gente. Pero llegó el año 19 y nos pasó lo que nos pasó. Evidentemente no supimos entender o no entendimos del todo lo que nuestra gente nos estaba pidiendo. Y ahí fue cuando nos prometieron nuestros 5 mejores años de nuestras vidas. Y ustedes son conscientes. Y ustedes son conscientes de que en realidad estamos lejos de estar pasando por nuestros 5 mejores años de nuestra vida. Por ser del interior. Tenemos al Senado pronto para salir a la cancha y hacer lo que tenemos que hacer. Legislar, pero darle también y fundamentalmente la gobernabilidad que nuestro país necesita. Nosotros tenemos las condiciones como para hacernos cargo de nuestro país y tenemos las condiciones para seguir trabajando en base a acuerdos, pero también con actitud firme y decidida, llevar adelante las transformaciones que el país necesita.
Sin duda, el Frente Amplio tiene que ganar las elecciones porque este país tiene que cambiar sustantivamente después de 5 años de un gobierno.
Now let's go on a short break. When we come back, we tell you that a Sri Lankan president makes a U-turn on IMF bailout. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now let's also tell you that China has joined a global rejection of a draft deal on climate finance at the COP29 summit on Thursday, but urged nations to bridge their differences with 1 day left in the talks. 2 opposing possibilities were presented in the statement issued by Azerbaijan, the host of the UN Climate Conference, demonstrating how wealthy and developing countries continue to differ greatly in how they provide funding for vulnerable states.
中方对当前的案文有很多不满意、不能接受的地方。我们呼吁各方相向而行，基于公约和巴黎协定的原则、精神和相关授权。
Now, Saudi Arabia warns that the Arab group would reject any UN climate deal that goes after fossil fuels. At the COP29 meeting in Azerbaijan, Saudi diplomat Al-Bara Tawfiq informed delegates that the Arab group will not accept any language that targets any particular industry, including fossil fuels.
The Arab group will not accept any text that targets any specific sectors, including fossil fuel, and no proposal on economic policies in developing countries, even on encouragement basis. On finance, we're extremely disappointed with the text presented to us for the following reasons. Ministerial Option 2 still reflects attempts to shift historical responsibilities and legal obligations. Option 2 is beyond the Paris Agreement, and we're not interested in renegotiating the Paris Agreement. Option 1 must include the quantum of 1.3 trillion per year provided and mobilized by developed countries with at least 500 US billion provided. Option 1 also uses language inconsistent with Article 9 of the...
Brazil has pledged to play a strong role as host of COP30, focusing on climate issues like deforestation and fossil fuel agreements. Speaking at COP29 in Azerbaijan, Brazil climate envoy Ana Toni confirmed that Brazil will champion a phase-out of fossil fuels despite being Latin America's largest oil producer. She emphasized the need for a global debate on transitioning away from fossil fuels, including potential taxes on coal, oil, and gas. Toni stated Brazil's commitment to leading by example, citing its history of addressing deforestation. COP30 will follow COP29 in Azerbaijan and COP28 in the UAE countries expanding fossil fuel production.
But what I think people can count on Brazil very strongly is that we always face the problems we had happen with deforestation. We know we have a problem with deforestation. We were there the first ones to say, let us stop deforestation. The same we'll do with fossil fuel, but that agreement needs to be together with the other countries. And Brazil will play a very, very strong role on pushing together other countries to do so.
And this will be something.
So we don't have anything to prove to anybody. We know we want to continue leading by example. We don't know of any other emerging country that has such ambitious targets, and we'll do our best to bring everybody along. We know that for some countries this is harder, but in the end of the day, we are all extremely vulnerable to climate change. Brazil if we leave Baku without finalizing the NCQG, many countries may rethink their NDCs.
In Asia, Sri Lanka's new leader has reversed his electoral promise to renegotiate the agreement by predecessor had negotiated by endorsing a contentious IMF bailout on Thursday. Leftist President Anura Kumara Dissanayake, who tightened his grip on power last week after winning a huge majority in the legislature following his own victory in September, vowed to maintain the IMF program. After defaulting on its $46 billion external debt in April 2022 amid an unprecedented economic crisis, Sri Lanka turned to the IMF for a rescue plan. The shortage of foreign exchange that left the country unable to finance even the most essential imports of food and fuel led to months of street protests and faced then-President Gotabaya Rajapaksa to resign.
මේ ආර්ථිකට විශාල හැරම් වරතු දෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒ නිසා බලයගත් අපි කුඩා හෝ අත්වර දීමක් මහත් ප්‍රතිවිපාක ගෙනත් දෙනවා. කල්පනා කරලා ගත යුතු අවස්ථාවකට අපි ලැබී තිබෙනවා. වැරදි කරන්න අවස්ථාවක් මේ ආර්ථිකයෙන් අපිට ඒ අනුව අපි ජනාධිපතිවරණ ජයග්‍රහණය කර වහාම අපි ජනාධිපතිවරණයේ අරමුදලත් එක්ක එකඟතාවයක් තිබෙන රාජ්‍යයක ඒකඟතාවය බිඳවට්ටව අපිට ඉදිරියට ගමනක් නැති බව අපි තේරුම් අරගත්තා. ඒ ප්‍රතිවිගත කරගැනීමේ යෝජනා හොඳ දීපාර්ශ්වීය ණය පිළිබඳ පොදු එකඟතාවයට අවිලා තිබෙනවා. අපි ඉක්මනින්ම
Indian opposition leader Rahul Gandhi has called for Gautam Adani to be immediately arrested on Thursday after U.S. prosecutors charged the billionaire industrialist founder with paying hundreds of millions of dollars in bribes and hiding the payments from investors. During a press conference in New Delhi, Gandhi also charged Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi for shielding Adani. However, Adani has referred to the accusation as baseless. Adani, the former second richest man in the world, has long been accused by critics of improperly profiting from his ties with Hindu nationalist Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
अमेरिका में क्राइम किया है, ये अमेरिका के इन्वेस्टिगेशन ने कहा है, मगर हिंदुस्तान में अदानी जी के खिलाफ कुछ नहीं हो रहा और ये हम मांग बहुत दिनों से कर रहे हैं। अदानी जी का अरेस्ट होना चाहिए, आज अरेस्ट होना चाहिए। 100% इस व्यक्ति की प्रोटेक्शन कर रहे हैं और इस व्यक्ति ने हिंदुस्तान के एसेट्स लिए हैं, भ्रष्टाचार करके एसेट्स लिए हैं। ये व्यक्ति बीजेपी को पूरा समर्थन करते हैं, पूरा सपोर्ट देते हैं।
Now, Nadim Aslam Chowdhury, the Chief Secretary of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa Province, confirms that at least 38 persons have been killed and 29 injured after gunmen opened fire on passenger cars in a tribal area in northwest Pakistan on Thursday. According to Chowdhury, a lady and a child were among those killed in the incident, which took place in the Kuram tribal district, and adds that it's a major tragedy and the death toll is likely to rise. Tensions have existed for decades between armed Shia and Sunni Muslims over a land dispute in a tribal area that borders Afghanistan. No group has claimed responsibility for the incident. Finally, an Australian teen, Bianca Jones, has become the 4th tourist to have died in a suspected mass poisoning in Laos. The 19-year-old's family confirmed her death to the media on Thursday. Hours earlier, the U.S. State Department told the media that an American man died in the tourist town of Van Vieng. According to Danish officials, 2 Danish women, aged 19 and 20, also died in Laos last week. They were not elaborate on the details due to confidentiality concerns. The deaths remain under police investigation. However, news report and testimonies online from other tourists suggest they may have consumed drinks laced with methanol, a deadly substance often found in bootleg alcohol. And that's all on Beyond the Continent. To follow us on social media, we are at News Central TV. And remember, you can watch News Central live on DSTV Channel 422, Star Times, Channel 274, Avo TV, and on YouTube. Many thanks for watching. My name is Mazino Appeal.